The information and opinions expressed on senior living are neither legally binding nor the responsibility of this cable system.
I'm an elder law attorney, and welcome to Senior Living. Today we're going to be talking about beneficiary designations and how it's so important to make sure the families have their beneficiary designations set up on their 401k plans, their IRAs, their life insurance. For the last few years, I've been doing Medicaid planning, estate planning, and retirement planning. And the three areas that we always want to talk about with our families are estate planning. We want to make sure that your paperwork is set up right. And we've had a segment on wills and trusts and power of attorneys and medical power of attorneys. The other area that we talk about is financial planning. We want to make sure that all of your finances are set up exactly right so that you can be assured that through the course of your life you're going to have as much money to live on and then pass on a legacy to your family members. And the last area is long-term care planning. With long-term care planning, there's typically three components: long-term care insurance, Medicaid, and VA benefits. Now, we had talks on a lot of these different topics, but it's so important to know that how they all interact between and within each other. So today we're going to be talking about financial planning and your beneficiary designations and how it relates to your estate planning documents. So let's get started. Every mom and dad that come and see me, we typically talk about their estate plan, which is their will and their living trust agreement. And it's very, very common that the plans work out the same way, which is mom, she does a trust agreement. And let's say mom has two kids, Joe and Jim. And I hope my grade school teachers don't watch me because of my poor penmanship. Joe has two kids, Jim has two kids. Very, very common for mom that says if she passes away, she wants her money to go down to her two children, Joe and Jim. But what happens if Joe passed away before mom? A lot of moms would want Joe's share to go down to his children, her grandchildren. So that's the typical estate plan, and that's where we want to make sure that all of your paperwork is set up right. Now, what I want you to do between now and the next time you see this show, go out and get your estate planning documents, your will and your trust agreement, but also go out and look for your other assets. If you have a 401k plan, an IRA, a 403b, if you work for the federal government, if you have a thrift savings plan, go get those beneficiary designations on those forms. And this is why it's so important. I did a seminar over the last year where we were told that 85% of the beneficiary designations that people have filled out already are wrong. They're either incomplete or they don't name the right beneficiaries. And we're going to show you why they're wrong right now. With mom's trust, we want to make sure her assets go into her trust, which is the house, her bank accounts, okay, her life insurance. All that goes into the trust, and what it's called is funding the trust. What you never, ever, ever, ever want in your trust are your retirement accounts. So we have there your IRAs. Or if you have a 401k plan. Or if you're a federal employee, you have a TSP or a thrift savings plan. Or you have, if you're a school teacher, you have a 457 plan. All of those are retirement plans that mean that when you get 59 and a half, you can start drawing money out. Or if you get 70 and a half, you have to start taking your required minimum distributions. Now, when these accounts are in an individual's name, you can start taking distribution based on your life expectancy. So you never, ever, ever want these in a trust. And the same holds true is that if you have, let's just use a 401k plan. Mom has a 401k plan. So mom is the owner. And then what she does is names beneficiaries. So this is the mom 401k, and she has her beneficiaries Joe and Jim, and then Joe has 2 kids. We want to make sure that 401k beneficiary designation matches mom's wishes, which are carried out in her trust agreement. And let's see how that's going to work. If mom passes away in her trust, her primary beneficiaries are Joe and Jim. And the trust says if Joe passes away before mom, his children get his share. Now, with your 401k plan, you have a beneficiary designation that you make when you enroll in the plan. And that says who your primary beneficiaries are, Joe and Jim. Now, if you want Joe share to go down to his kids, that beneficiary form controls. If you have a life insurance policy, the beneficiary designation that you have set up with the life insurance company controls. If you have a beneficiary listed on a bank account, that beneficiary designation controls. The trust only controls trust assets, or if the trust is a beneficiary of an asset, it controls that distribution. Otherwise, whatever you have set up at your work or with your bank or with your IRA company, that's going to be the one that controls the distribution. Now, every one of these beneficiary designations are set up wrong, or just about every one that we've seen. And the reason being is they're so confusing. There's different forms. There's only about 1 billion different financial companies out there, and every financial company has a different beneficiary form. So I went through some beneficiary designation forms to get ready for the show, and I went through a lot of the typical ones that families come in to see me. And we have a lot of GM employees and a lot of GM retirees. Typically, their 401k plan, which is their retirement account, is through Fidelity, and they administer the plan. So I looked at their beneficiary designation. So don't forget, mom says if she passes away, now she could have inherited this 401k plan through her husband, or this could be her separate 401k plan. She says that she wants her 401k to go to Joe and Jim, but if Joe dies, she wants his share to go down to his 2 kids. That's the premise. So when you look at a 401k beneficiary designation from Fidelity, it says that if the percentage is indicated and a primary beneficiary does not survive me, that beneficiary's share shall be divided between the surviving primary beneficiaries. What does that mean? 50% to Joe, 50% to Jim. If Joe dies, all of his share goes to Jim. So if Joe passed away before Jim, all of the money goes to Jim. Under this Fidelity beneficiary designation form, all of the primary beneficiaries have to pass away before they go down to the contingent beneficiaries. So with this form, and if you have a Fidelity 401k plan, go look it up. it's set up that if you want your money to be divided between your children, if one of your kid dies before you and you want his share to go to his kids, it's set up wrong. It has to be changed. Next one, 403B. Like if you're if you have a 403B plan, and you go look up your beneficiary form. So go get them out of your file somewhere. It will allow you to designate. Now this one is with Vanguard. And it says, to my descendants who survive me, per stirpes. Now what that means is if Joe dies before mom, his share is going to go down to his children. So with that form, it gives you a lot of different pages and a lot of different opportunities to identify beneficiary designations. Here it lays it out really nice for you. So you can pick and say, okay, it says, hey, if my son dies before me, I want his share to go to his kids. You check it off on the form. It works great. All right? Next one. This is the greatest one. This is the greatest one that I saw so far. If you're a federal employee, let's say you work at TACOM, and you have a federal thrift savings plan. That's the federal employee retirement plan. Now, with that form, they fill it out great for you. It says, identify who your primary beneficiaries are. So you list those. Now, if you read the instructions, which a lot of people don't, and it's funny, I just heard that more people spend more time planning their vacation than they do planning their retirement. So this one says, if you don't do anything, when you're designating your beneficiary on your thrift savings plan, so if you don't make any elections at all, that plan identifies who's your beneficiaries. And the plan says, well, if I die, it goes to my spouse. If I have no spouse, it goes to my children equally, or the descendants of a deceased child by right of representation. So if you don't do anything on the form, it says it's going to go to Joe. If he dies before you, it goes to his 2 children. Now that's great. However, if you make a designation, they have to follow the designation. And right after our break, I'm going to go into how that works on this thrift savings plan. So I hope you're excited about this. During the break, run out and get your beneficiary forms if you can get them, or the next time you come back, have them, and we'll go over your plan specifically. I'll see you in a minute. Every family has the family meeting, and we all know what that means. Dad's got dementia. What are we going to do? What's the care plan that the family has in place? And usually they don't, or they struggle with a care plan because they don't know what services are available out there, and they really don't know what's out there to help pay for those services to keep mom and dad home longer. When you go home tonight and you talk to your family, and you talk to your tax person, and you talk to your financial person, and you talk to any one of your advisors, I want you to look at them and say, what's the plan that you have in place? What's the care plan specifically for me today? And as soon as they don't give you an answer, give me a call, because I can do it for you. Okay, thanks for tuning back in. My name is Patrick Simasko, and this is Senior Living. We're talking about the beneficiary designation forms on federal employees' thrift savings plans. Now, again, if you don't do anything on the form, you don't make any election at all, it's going to go from dad to mom to the kids, if Joe dies, to his kids. However, it says if you make a beneficiary designation, it goes to those primary beneficiaries. If one dies, it goes to the other primary beneficiaries. So on the front page of that form, it says designating your beneficiaries, and it lays it out. It doesn't tell you to lay out contingent beneficiaries. It's very confusing. So if you start filling out the form like they want you to do, if you don't do it exactly right, Joe dies, it goes to Jim. Now, how happy is Jim? He's happy. Okay, he's going to get all of the money. Now, a lot of families come up to me and say, Pat, if it's in Joe and Jim's name, well, Jim knows that Mom wanted Joe's share to go to his kids. And a lot of times, that son or daughter will give the money to the kids. If you have a joint bank account, Mom dies, it goes to Jim, he absolutely can split up the money between his brothers and sisters or nieces and nephews. The trouble is with a 401k plan, the whole benefit of having a 401k plan or other retirement account like an IRA is that you want to be able to stretch that want to be able to stretch that payout to the kids or grandkids as long as possible. This is how it works. When Mom has her money in her 401k plan, the best thing about those 401ks is that you put the money in tax deferred. You put it in when you have a high tax rate, so when you can retire, you can stretch it out and take your required minimum distributions over your whole life expectancy and pay the tax as you go along. Now, if you have it set up that you have Joe and Jim are your primary beneficiaries, they can stretch that IRA or turn it into, stretch that 401k if the plan allows it and start making distributions over their life expectancy. If Joe dies, the kids, the grandkids, they want to be able to stretch those payouts over their life expectancy if it plays out that way. So, if Joe dies, and let's say that we have a $300,000 IRA, or 401k plan. You want $150 to go to Joe, $150 to go to Jim. You want to be able to stretch that out over their life expectancies. Now, if Joe passes away and Jim has the whole $300, he absolutely is entitled to give Joe's share down to those grandkids. But what does he have to do? He has to cash in $150,000 out of that 401k plan. And when you cash it in to pay down to those grandchildren, Joe's children here, he has to pay tax on $150,000. And what do you think the tax is going to be? Let's say it's a third. So we just lost $50,000 that has to be paid out immediately to the IRS and to the state of Michigan just so that those grandkids can get their share. If the beneficiary designation would have been set up right, it could have flowed through Joe down to those kids, and they could be paying a little bit of the tax as they go along. And that's why it's so important to have that designation set up the right way. So let's look at another one. This is one for typical Chrysler employees. You may name one or more primary and contingent beneficiaries. Your contingent beneficiary will not receive the benefits unless all your primary beneficiaries predecease you. So what that means is that it's going to go down. Joe's kids won't get it. Jim's getting everything. Now, Mom has the opportunity to change that beneficiary designation, but she doesn't know that she has to. When families come in and talk to me, and I talk about their estate planning, their trust, I said, this is what we want. Now you want to make sure that your beneficiaries are set up the right way. And they always say the same thing, don't worry about it. I have my kids listed as beneficiaries, and they flow down from there. But now we just found out that every one of those could be, or most likely are, set up wrong. Let's now go to IRAs. 401k plans are set up through your employer. If you have an IRA, they're a little bit more beneficiary designation friendly. They have the forms that are set up a little bit easier that you can understand it. And here is an ING, which is a common IRA insurance company that have IRA annuities. And it doesn't have to be an IRA, it could be any of them. it could be non-IRA or non-qualified money. It says that you name your primary contingent beneficiaries. If an insured's child is a beneficiary and he or she dies before the insured, the child's share will be divided among the child's surviving children. So that says right there, you check that box. Joe dies, his share goes 20 down to his 2 kids. And if that's an IRA, Jim gets his 150. Joe's share drops down to the 2 grandkids, so they're getting $75,000 apiece. And they can stretch the payment out. They do not have to cash it in. They can pay the tax as they go along under the IRA, the IRS Beneficiary Designation rules. And we're going to get into a lot more about that in one of our next segments coming up. So, if you have an IRA, look at those beneficiary designations and see if they're set up right. And there's a better chance that those are going to be set up right for you. Okay? Now, you can absolutely change them. If they're set up wrong, you can change the beneficiary designations, or if that plan does not provide you the opportunity to make a beneficiary designation the way that you want it, typically with 401k plans or 457s or thrift savings plans, if they don't allow you to do what you want to do when you retire, you can do a rollover into an IRA that's going to allow you to provide the beneficiary designations that you want to follow your existing estate plan. Now, a lot of families say, well, why can't we just make the trust the beneficiary? You can make a trust the beneficiary of an IRA or a 401k, but it really has, the trust has to be set up exactly right. It has to be a flow-through trust. The trouble is if you name the trust as the beneficiary, typically these kids can make the distributions based on their life expectancy, which is based on their age. If you have 5 kids and one kid's really old and maybe a grandchild's a beneficiary, you want to be able to use the grandchild's age to stretch that out. If you name the trust as the beneficiary, you have to pick the oldest beneficiary's life to determine the life expectancy for the required minimum distributions. So, there's a lot better tax advantages out there for naming an individual as primary beneficiary and then children or grandchildren as contingent beneficiaries. That's why we typically don't use a trust as the beneficiary of a qualified retirement account or an IRA. Life insurance, same thing. There's a MetLife life insurance designation. It's typically set up to the primary beneficiaries, and then it goes to all of the primary beneficiaries the same way. Joe dies, it goes to Jim. Life insurance, you definitely want that to have the beneficiary set up in the trust. So, where does that leave us right now? If we know they're wrong, we got to fix them. We have to fix them. So what we're doing in our office, and we're getting to all of our clients, and we're calling it a retirement plan beneficiary audit. We need to take a look at what you have, your existing will and trust. If you don't have a trust, come on in. We want to do one for you. We want to take a look at your beneficiaries on your bank accounts, your 401k plans, your IRAs, your 457 plans. We want to look at all of the different beneficiaries that you have set up. And what we're going to do for you is we're going to identify each plan. Is it a 401k? Is it an IRA? Is it a 457? What's the payout structure? Can we save you any taxes? Are you taking the right amount of money out now? You want to be taking money out of your 401k or your retirement account at the cheapest tax rate possible. So if your kids get the IRA or the 401k, they have to take it out but they may be pulling out based on their tax bracket versus your tax bracket, which may be a lot lower. We want to know who the primary and contingent beneficiaries are, and ultimately, we're going to use a tertiary beneficiary. Now, what is that? A tertiary beneficiary says, boy, what happens if my primary and contingent pass away? Who gets it then? We want a fail-safe. It's going to go to this person or this charity to make sure that it's going to who you want it to go to versus who the government says it's going to go to, with the ability to stretch the payment of those taxes as long as possible. So we're going to take a look at everything, and we're going to lay it out for you and say, okay, this is the best way to do it. This is the best way to handle it. This absolutely needs to be fixed, and we need to fix it before. And when you have to do everything by? Before you pass away. Because once you pass away or you become incompetent, you lose the ability to change the beneficiaries. And that's when the fight starts. Mom never wants to disinherit her grandkids. She does not want fighting. Her children want to make sure that their children or the grandchildren are protected. So it's really, the families, the kids have to rely on mom and dad to have it set up right so there's no fighting later on. And that is the worst thing that we see in the office, is when kids start fighting. Or who knows, grandkids start fighting. You want to have that set up the right way. So, when you set it up the right way, you want everything to flow as the designation of your beneficiaries are. So what we want to have you do is come on in the office, and when we take a look at everything, we're going to make sure your estate planning is set up the way you want it, along with your financial planning documents are set up the way that you want it. Now, as importantly, we want to make sure that these all tie in with your long-term care planning. It's not how much you make, it's how much you get to your kids. And we want to make sure that, God forbid, someone had to go into an assisted living, needed in-home care, or God forbid you had to go to nursing home. We want to make sure that the money that you saved your whole life is protected for your beneficiaries, so that you're entitled and get the benefits that you're entitled to. We want to make sure that all of the money that you save for your entire lifetime gets down to your beneficiaries through your estate plan. It's not wasted on long-term care. Because again, it's not how much you make, it's how much you can pass down to your kids.